that one thing allowed me to go from quitting my day job, and then ultimately 6 months after that, I was presenting myself to the market as a professional mastering engineer. I was winning projects based on my masters themselves.
Welcome back to the Prolific, what's it called? Prolific Super Producer Podcast?
Yes.
You and I both do this. We've both done this. Okay. All right. Welcome back to the Prolific Super Producer Podcast. This is your hub. If you want to be the do-it-all artist, right, where you're wearing all the hats, you want to write the songs, record the songs, produce the songs, mix the songs, master the songs, get them out there. This is for you. This has got some combined experience between Tyson and myself, and we are in your corner every step of the way through this process. And speaking of, oh yes, we're not even getting into the episode yet, and we've got a goodie for you. If you head to finishsongsguide.com, not finish like the land, but like finish, right? Start, finish. Songsguide.com. We've got a free guide for you that'll help you pump out songs. It's a simple 5-step process. If you just feel stuck, if writer's block has got you, if you're feeling uninspired or stale in your workflow, this is the kick in the pants that you need to get more songs out there, because the more songs that you finish it just means more at-bats, right? The more songs that are out there in the world can progress you to where you want to be. And we hope that that's professional. That's really the aim of this podcast. But hey, that could just be personal too, right? When was the last time that you had a song that was done that you played in your car and you were proud of how it sounded? You know what I'm saying? Let's get more of those moments. So you can head to finishsongsguide.com to get your hands on that guide. But today, this is exciting, right? We're going to dive into our main man here, Tyson's origin story. Just like every Avenger has an origin story, Tyson is our resident Avenger, and he has an origin story, and that's what we're going to be going into today. So Tyson, what's going on, man?
Yeah, so, luckily I didn't have to get stolen by the Taliban to, come up with my origin story.
That would have been a good intro, though.
It would have been. It would have been like, oh yeah, back in the day, I got, kidnapped by the Taliban, and right. I managed to fight my way out in a big iron suit.
There we go.
Unfortunately, that is not my story. It's not quite that epic. I'm pretty sure that only happens in movies. Maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I've yet to meet that person.
Right. Awesome. Well, hey, I just want to jump right in. And I know a lot of podcasts when people are interviewing other people, right? Like there's a lot of benefit and a lot of stuff that we can learn from just people sharing their story. So while I don't want to hunker at this particular part of setting up the story for too long, would you just give us all kind of like a brief origin story, so to speak? Like what's the spark notes of like, how did you get into music? Because I know you're not only mixing and mastering a savant when it comes to those areas, right? But you also write your own music. You are an artist yourself, and you also have an interest in helping develop other artists. So you've just kind of got like a full spectrum of knowledge and interest and passion here. Walk us back, rewind the clock. When did this stuff happen? What was music with your story?
Yeah, so growing up, I wouldn't say that my family was overly musical. I don't know if my dad has a musical bone in his body, to be honest.
Okay.
The only things I ever heard my dad play was when he was working in his shop, and he would play classic 70s and 80s rock. That was the only thing that I ever heard from his stereo. He would never listen to music in the car either. So it was just kind of interesting dichotomy between that. And then my mom was a really good pianist, and so she taught piano lessons for a long time, taught all of her kids, and so that's kind of where my introduction to music started, was taking piano lessons when I was like 6 or 7 years old, and just kind of being exposed to the classic world of classic piano. So that's kind of where I initially encountered music and started my journey. I didn't really stick with it. I didn't love it. It was all right. I'm like, oh yeah, this is fun, but I know my mom was disappointed because she had always said, like, of all of the kids, like, I feel like you had the most, natural talent for it, and then you just never stuck with it. Fast forward to middle school, I decided that I wanted to form a band. And so then I got together with a friend and my brother, and we're like, we're going to form a band. And none of us really knew anything about music at that point. Like, I could play a little bit on the piano. I think I played trombone in symphonic band, but beyond that, I didn't have any like useful skills when it came to forming a band. So I tried to play guitar. That didn't work very well. And then my friend was actually a better guitarist than me, so he started playing guitar. And then my brother was a percussionist, so he played drums. And then I ended up just getting stuck on the bass. And the very first time I played the bass, it was this really weird moment. So I was in pep band, and so we were waiting to go out to play a football game. But we had some like time to kill. It was like 2 hours or whatever before the actual pep band game started, like after school, kind of like that dead zone. And so then I was just like hanging around the band room, and then this dude, his name is Heath Nishek. He actually connected with me on Instagram recently. That was super weird.
What a name, dude.
But so Heath, he was an amazing guitarist. He played like progressive metal, and he was like just jamming in the other room. And so then he called my friend over to the room, and he's like, hey, can you play rhythm for me? And I'm just going to solo over this. And so he was like, sure, I guess I can do that. So then he started playing rhythm, and then he saw me and he's like, hey, like you come over here. Like he handed me a bass and he said, play this note. And so I just sat there playing the one note, just like jaw probably like on the floor, watching this guy just like solo over what I'm playing, and it was incredible.
Wow.
But it was like this weird moment of me like contributing something to somebody else's art, and then like that feeling, though, I think everybody who's ever been in a band and played with other people has had that moment of just like realization of like we're creating something amazing together. So that's like really where the bug kind of got me, and then I like never looked back from there. I really dove into playing bass at that point. Like that is still to this day my main instrument.
Okay.
I eventually went back and learned how to play guitar, and learned, brushed up on my piano, and learned how to sing when I was 18. And then my band in high school kind of broke up right after we graduated. Naturally, we were all from the small town, so it was kind of natural that we all kind of went our own directions and tried to find our own way in the world. My introduction to recording happened, though, in those initial years of forming the band. So about 2 or 3 years after we formed the band, we kind of all actually learned how to play our instruments, and then decided, okay, we want to record these songs that we've been writing for the last 3 years. So we came up with 8 or 9 songs, and we said we're gonna record an album. And so I found the one guy in town who was a retired touring musician. He was actually a bassist himself. He was incredible. But he had a home studio set up. And so we were like, hey, can you help us record our album? And he said, sure, like I'll record the first song for you and we'll see how it goes. So then we spend 2 days with him. We record the first single, no mixing, no mastering, but it sounded amazing. It was great. Like he was a very talented guy.
Wow.
And he knew basically the basics of what he was doing recording.
Yeah.
Then he's like, I don't think I can continue working with you. Like I have a family, I'm busy, like I just can't do this for free.
Sure.
So he's like, I'll give you my gear so you can go record yourselves. So he gave me his gear.
What? He just gave you his gear? What a stud.
Well, I mean, yeah, he lent me
let you borrow it, but
gear.
Still, dude, I mean, I don't know about you, like I get real stingy about my gear. I'm trying to be better, but like I don't know, it's like I'm super protective over it. So he must have really saw something. This like OG professional must have. I don't know,
or he was just like so busy, and he's like, I don't care, like I'm not even using it myself. Like go ahead. I don't know, like what his reasonings is. Like
sure,
maybe I've never even thought about it that way. Like maybe he did see something
honestly,
in us. I'm not sure.
I don't know. I mean, think about why would you part with anyone listening, right? Like why would you part with your own gear that you've spent money on and stuff? I don't know. I would think at least part of it had to be he heard something.
Yeah, so I mean, cool. He did record the first song, so maybe I don't know.
All right, sorry, I decided to be like that. That's such a cool moment. Wow.
Anyway, so then I was like trying to figure out how to use all of this gear right that he had given me, and so I set up shop in my parents' basement. I took our Windows computer. It was a 2001 Windows computer with Windows XP on it, right? Best operating system Windows ever had. And so I took that and then started recording in our basement. I was using a cracked version of Cubase.
There we go.
And just tried to figure it out. And I knew nothing. I did not know a clue what I was doing, so I was like Googling things online, like trying to figure out like how do you mic a drum set. I basically copied from what I could remember what he had showed me, and I was just like trying to put it all together. And we ended up recording the whole thing. I tried mixing it, and I didn't know anything about mixing. I didn't even know what compression was, and so I was just like messing around with EQs. I'm like, why isn't it loud? Like I just didn't know a clue.
I love it.
And then I eventually, kind of finished mixing it and decided, I'm like, okay, it's done. So we like put it on a CD, and we ended up having one show, and this kind of leans into actually another one, but I think it's applicable. So we had one show that we did inside of our hometown, and our hometown is really small. It was 2,500 people, like total population.
Sure.
There's no like the nearest town was 30 minutes away, so it wasn't like we were close to a big city either.
Gotcha.
And so we then promoted this show that we had. We booked a venue. We did the whole thing. We actually went on our like morning announcements at our high school and said, "Hey, we're doing a show." I don't know why they let us do that, but they did.
Let's go.
And we got people to actually show up to this show. We actually made enough money to then pay for a PA system that we were trying to buy. So
score.
It actually worked out. It was great. And then at the end of the show, I was like, we made, $400 or whatever. Like that's more money that I've ever made in my life with music.
And from music.
I was like, I was like super excited, super pumped about it. And then at that moment, my dad approached me and was like, he's like, "Oh, like, did you have fun?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, it was awesome. Like it was great." And then he was like, "Well, I sure hope that you never expect to do this for a living, or I hope you never expect to make money from this." And I was like, talk about, people who like just don't believe in you, or just like, and obviously coming from like my dad, which like in his defense, he just knows nothing about music, and he was and from like a parent's perspective, like you're trying to protect your child and you don't want to see them get hurt.
Sure.
And that's the culture around music, is like it's just so hard to get into, so hard to do well, that the assumption is 99% of people are going to fail, which is not necessarily false, but I think that most people just don't make it in music because they don't try hard enough, long enough.
Yeah. 100%. Dude, wow.
Anyway.
Okay, so that was the first, so that was the same day that you had just made like a few $100 off of music, and then your dad, wow. Okay, so that had to have been a moment. Like how did you respond to that? Do you remember? Or like, what were your next steps? Were you excited to still do music, or was it like weird at all if you were doing music? I don't know, just be curious to know how it felt.
Yeah. So I mean, no, I was still excited. Like I didn't think it changed anything. Like I was still very like dedicated to the band and doing music in general.
Yeah. Okay.
But it definitely did put that like seed of doubt of like, oh, is this like really the right path for me in terms of like long term? Because like at that point in time, like right after that show, the minute like we ended the set, I was like, oh yeah, like I'm gonna do this rest of my life. Like I'm gonna be a touring musician. Like we're gonna do this thing. And then he comes in and tells that to me, and then I was just obviously so disappointed, but also like that seed of doubt was then cast in my mind of like, oh, maybe this isn't the right path for me. So at that point in time, like I kind of ignored it to an extent. Like I tried to brush it off. I was like, yeah, whatever, Dad, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, right.
But like I can't, like it still impacted me.
Yeah,
like
sure.
I can't lie about that.
I would be curious to know, just real quick before you keep going, right? Like, because I feel like a lot of us, any creatives, not even just musicians, right, but just creative people in general, like we run up against our first like subtle knife, that like hits and goes right to the core. And maybe it's from a family member, from a friend, from a random comment or something like that. But I feel like we all come up against that first deep cut of like someone not, and like you said, I love your perspective looking back, which I feel like maybe we should try to have a little bit more grace to, because, we're a different kind of people, are we not? Us creatives and musicians and stuff. So like just to have some room for people who don't have a category for that, I think is a big way to avoid feeling so bummed out, because it's just like, oh man, they just don't get it. I don't know, just like I don't understand how to like look at a skyscraper and tell you how it was built. You know what I mean? Like a lot of people look at a song, hear a song, they couldn't tell you how it was constructed, right? So just having grace for the other person. But then there's this theme of resilience, I feel like, in any creative or any musician. We're talking about artists and stuff here specifically, but I think any creative that finds success or that keeps going, there's at least some mention of resilience in their story, or some like visualization of it. So I feel like, you just saying, yeah, I heard my dad, he said that, and that's your father telling you stuff, and you were able to like, yeah, that stung a little bit, but kind of to compartmentalize and put that over to the side and be like, yeah, whatever, I'm still going to do this. I know that is true in my story of hearing things from people, but for some reason, you don't let it go down deep enough to where it actually stops you from taking action. You like put it away and you just keep going. So I'm curious, what was if you're looking back now at your story, what was the thing that enabled you to keep going? Like despite that?
One thing of when I formed the band, when I like got into the band to begin with, all I wanted to do was recreate the feeling that the records that I was listening to created in myself. So that was kind of like my underlying desire always, was to record a record. Okay. Which is why I was the person in the band who stepped up and said, "Hey, I want to record the band," like, because that's what I was passionate about. That's what ultimately I didn't really want to be in a band. Ultimately, I just wanted to record, and that didn't like connect in my brain at some point. Yeah. To answer your question, I did let it impact me. After my band broke up, I didn't pursue music. I went and I was planning on being a dentist. That was my career path.
Yeah, right.
That's what I wanted to be for a while. And so then I went to a 1-year Bible school for a year, and then I was like planning on going back to like, you know, traditional college and actually pursuing dentistry. And so once I got back to college, though, I saved up enough money the summer before I went to buy myself a MacBook. And so like that was like my secret, right? So like, okay, I'm gonna buy this MacBook and I'm gonna like be able to produce my own music on my own dime. Like I don't have to pay anybody else to like try to do this stuff. So that was my initial just like toolbox, right? I had Logic Pro and that was it.
Let's go.
And then by the end of my first semester of college, I saved up enough money to then buy a microphone.
There we go.
So then I had a microphone, a Focusrite 2i2 interface, and my MacBook Pro. And so then I started on that journey of like, oh, I could just like play around. Like, you know, this is my hobby. Music has always been, you know, kind of there for me. And I could then recreate some stuff that I wanted to. Like I said, like when I was 18, I learned how to sing. I could never sing before then. And so then I had all the skills at that point in time to actually create an entire record. I used MIDI drums in Logic. I recorded the bass and guitar myself, and then I sang. And that was my whole record. I had like, you know, a few keys in there too, but beyond that, like I had all the skills, basic skills that I needed to create my own record. So then by the end of my freshman year, I spent my entire spring break that year recording this record. And
love it.
And so I had like 10 days or whatever, you know, a week and then 2 weekends to record. So I recorded an entire record, and it was like hardly a record. It was like maybe 7 or 8 songs. I don't know. It was pushing it. I call it a record.
Yeah, we'll call it a record. Come on.
Yeah. So anyway, and then that was just like kind of my foray into like hobbyist musician land of just like, I'm just doing this for fun. It's a thing.
Yeah.
Right. And then after I did that, then I was like, oh, like this was fun. Like I feel like I actually produced something that was worthwhile. I'm going to do this again, except this next time I'm going to take it more seriously.
Oh, okay.
So then I wrote some more songs into my sophomore year of college. Then I decided I'm going to go to a real studio with a real producer and I'm going to record this. And it was a fun experience. Don't get me wrong. I don't really regret paying for like the recording experience, like working with another producer. That was really fun because before then I had only done my own stuff. Okay. And had nobody but me in the echo chamber to bounce ideas off of.
Yeah, that's right.
At that point, I got my record produced, and ultimately I was really disappointed with the final outcome because I had hired my producer to mix it, and I just don't think he was like quite there yet to really be able to bring that record to life. Okay. And so recently, actually about 6 months ago, I decided to remix and remaster that album and then stick it out there. It's actually an EP.
Let's go.
But so it actually is out there in the world if you want to go check it out. I don't necessarily think it's the best songs ever, but it was just something that I felt like I needed to go back and do and finish those.
Way to do that. That's awesome.
Anyway, so I guess to fast forward a little bit, during that time I also met this guy. His name was Ruben, and he, without asking me, really, I don't know, we never discussed it, but all of a sudden he just started inviting me over to his apartment, and then he would like show me all of this stuff with music production because he knew that he had heard my like first record, and he's like, oh, we can make this better, basically. Okay. And so he brought me over to his place and just started like showing me all this stuff. Wow. And like I was really introverted, and so I was like very, very awkward, and I was just like, I had no idea what was going on. Yeah. And so I just like let him like show me whatever he wanted to show me, and I asked like a few questions here and there, but ultimately that was also like my first like foray into actual music production of like learning really what stuff actually was, like how to record things, how to create a wider stereo spectrum in your mix, just basic things that really opened my eyes to what's possible with music, and just from a more creative standpoint.
Yeah. Well, I have a question about the.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think this is a experience that a lot of people face. So I face the exact same thing. So you're making songs by yourself, right? And especially if you're kind of wearing all hats, I guess not even necessarily wearing all the hats, but you're just making songs by yourself. You save up some cash, or you have an opportunity to then take your artistry and kind of trust it in the hands of someone else, right? And so I remember the first time I was able to book studio time to record a song, right? And for me, I was younger. I mean, I was like 19. I was like 19 years old or something. And so like the allure of, oh, I'm in this big fancy studio and I see look at this, the big desk that I always see in magazines, and you're just like fascinated by all this stuff. I don't know, just talk about that, because I shared the same thing. I remember getting the mix back, listening to it, and I was like, what happened? You know what I mean? I was like, this doesn't really hit me. And I'm sure you could speak to being a mixing and mastering engineer. You could speak to I forget what the term is, but it's like where you get so invested in your demo or in your version that, like, you know what I mean? Like, you can't let it go, even though it sounds way better and sounds more ready for Spotify, ready for radio. You know what I mean? So, like, how did you feel about that? Getting that mix back for the first time, or hearing it and just being like, oof, this is not, I don't really like this.
And I think it was actually a very similar experience to yours when you described it. It wasn't necessarily bad, it just wasn't what I had in mind, and it wasn't my creative vision.
Yes.
And when you're talking about demoitis,
that's it. Thank you.
That when you listen to your demo so much that you can't separate yourself from that particular version of the song to then accept something else, even if it's better. Mm-hmm. And so that happens so much because we listen to our songs so much when we're creating them, like over and over and over. We're tweaking tiny synth parts to make them more hip, or like 100%. Anyway, there's just like so many things that we dive into, and so we have a really hard time once we entrust that to somebody else to then actually trust them to do their thing when we're doing ours. Just so sold on that other version of what we gave them.
100%.
There's a couple lessons, though, that I took away from this that I think are really applicable for everyone listening. And the one thing is, explore all of your options before you commit to something. So in my case, my producer assumed that I didn't have a budget. That's not actually true, because I was willing to spend money if I felt like it would improve the project. That was where I was at. And my producer didn't have that conversation with me of like, what's your actual budget? Like, tell me, and then we can work with it to produce the best project possible. But I think I ended up spending only $1,500 to produce 5 songs, and which is, like, if you've ever been to a professional studio, that's nothing.
No, that's crazy.
And somehow we did still like meet that budget. But at the same time, like, I was probably willing to throw another $1,000 at it easy to if I felt like it was worth it. I probably could have paid way more to get some more experienced mixing engineers or mastering engineers on that project.
Sure.
He didn't even give that option to me because he just, again, assumed that I didn't have a very good budget. So I guess, like, if you're producing for people, don't assume that they don't have a budget. Ask them.
Huge.
And treat it as a collaborative project. You're like, okay, what's your budget? Like, what can we get done with this budget? And then also, from the other side of it, don't assume that your producer, just because they produced the album, is the best person to mix it as well. Yeah. Because he was a great recording engineer. I don't think he was a great mixing engineer, because he was still, like, learning his own, like, he was on his own journey of improvement on that side. Ultimately, it would have been better had I hired anybody else to mix the project, or not anybody, but
sure.
a lot of other people. I should say. Don't just assume that just because you have a relationship with somebody that they also have the skills to back that up. So a lot of people fall into that mistake of, just because they produced it, they also should mix and master it as well. So it's not a linear process all the time. And also, as currently a mastering engineer, right, I'm always getting projects that somebody else mixed, and especially somebody else produced, because it's ultimately better as a mastering or mixing engineer, because you come in with a fresh perspective. You're objective about the song. It's really warm, it's really dark, there's no highs in this song, so it's not very crispy. It's going to sound really quiet on Spotify after it's released if I don't fix this issue. But the mixing engineer probably spent so much time with that song, they can't actually objectively master it either. So there's a lot of like psychology that goes into all of this. But at the end of the day, don't just blindly trust your producer. Do your own research and also explore all of the options. Even if you do want to use your producer to mix your song, ask them, who else would you recommend to mix my song and how much would that cost? Just explore that option. Like, they probably know other mixing engineers that they know are awesome. And so just explore those options. Like, even if you decide to go against it, at least you thought about it and made the best decision for you. So
that's huge.
That's kind of my blanket advice for for hiring any producer, mixing, or mastering engineer. Also, secondly, always listen to their portfolio. Don't ever hire somebody blind.
Yes.
Make sure that they can actually back up what they say with real work, unless they're doing it for free or very, very cheap, because then obviously they're still trying to build their portfolio.
Sure.
In that case, it can kind of be mutually beneficial. You can get some cheap recordings or free recordings, and then they can build their portfolio. So they're still getting value out of you as an artist coming to them. So
that's big.
Lots of options there, but ultimately, if you're really serious about it, make sure you do just drop some coin to actually get the right stuff done for your song, because that's going to go way further than just trying to nickel and dime everybody along the process.
That's huge. That's really good advice there. So, if you need to rewind, re-listen to that. I'm sure we'll actually be covering a lot more of that too, and just future stuff that we're going to cover. But that's really good, man. Thanks for sharing. Okay, I want to pull us forward a little bit. We've got a little bit of the origin story. What would you? And it seems like and maybe a lot of people can relate to this. I know I can. You kind of meet various Gandalfs and Dumbledores along the way. You meet kind of someone who shows you something, and you meet someone else who shows you something. And for you, with Ruben and production and stuff like that. So let's pull forward to kind of all of this stuff has been brewing, right? And it's starting to accrue. What is the breakthrough moment that kind of pushed you forward? Maybe pushed you into more of, if we say the professional landscape, so to speak, right? What pushed you forward from what was the thing that allowed you to use all the stuff that had been brewing under the surface and kind of push it through in a real way, like a professional way? What was that thing? Yeah,
I'm trying to think of the actual moment. I feel like it was for me, it was more of a slow transition. So there was a couple of moments that do stick out in my mind. The first one being, I decided that music would be a great way to earn some just side income. So just a quick recap. At the last of my college career, I did not pursue dentistry, and because I couldn't pass chemistry. I take that back. I could pass it, but not with the grades that I needed to get into dental school. Because I didn't want to retake the class, I decided maybe this just isn't for me. All the biology, chemistry courses were more challenging for me than all of my other courses. So I was like, maybe it's just not the best fit. So then I leaned into more of the business and finance side. So I actually have a degree in accounting. That's my my college degree. And then I actually was in that field for a while. So right out of college, actually, while I was still in college, I got a full-time offer from a local company here in Boise, Idaho, and I started working there as a project manager, bringing on new clients to their system. They do, I was working in finance and accounting, so it was kind of a blend of the two. So it was honestly pretty cool. I was very glad still to this day that I had that experience. And, I feel like you learn just so much in those first couple of years of working any professional job.
Oh, yeah, come on.
Especially in that capacity rather than, at the bakery where I was working before.
Yeah, right.
All that said, so that was kind of my life situation. And then I decided, it'd be kind of fun to get back into this music thing, because I'd kind of put it on the back burner, right? While I was, I was getting married at that same point in time, getting a full-time job and all that stuff. And then I decided, let's dive back into this music stuff a little bit. Then I recorded one song, and it was a cover song of a popular contemporary Christian music track. And so I did that cover. It's kind of like a pop rock cover. And then I asked the worship pastor at my church, hey, could you come and record vocals on this? So he came and he recorded the vocals, just kind of a little, fun little hobby project.
Yeah.
And then I just threw it out there on Spotify. I think I spent $50 in ads to promote the song.
Yeah.
And then it ended up getting over the course of the next 3 years, I earned $500 off that song, just because it was streaming in the Philippines, of all places. Yeah,
that's amazing.
So that was kind of like one moment I was like, oh, like there's actually something to this. Like I could
huge.
actually, there's money in this and there's like potential. So I was like, okay, that's interesting. Let me start taking this more seriously, because at that point I was just like in my, the back room of my house, like, hey, let's, do some stuff. I was also in some bands at that point in time that never really have mounted to much, but that was kind of a little. So I was like still in music overall. From there, though, I went into this phase of like, oh, let's pursue this more production stuff, because I feel like there's more money in it. If anybody tells you there's more money in any one area of the music industry, they're lying. There's equal amount of money in any area of the music industry. You just have to pick a lane and stick to it long enough to survive. And then if you survive long enough, then you will make money. That's my just blanket advice for anybody wanting to get into music. Pick a lane and stick with it long enough until you make money. Then you can pivot later.
Oh, yeah.
After that, I went into that, kind of the production realm, looking up all the YouTube videos and all of this stuff. And then about 6 to 9 months later, I was then working on a house. So I was helping my dad flip a house. So I had a construction background, so I was just working on this house. And what do you do when you work on a house? You just listen to podcasts because you have nothing else to do. So like, well, I'm drilling in drywall in the bottom of the house, in the basement, and I'm just listening to this podcast called The Six Figure Home Studio. And I'm sure a lot of people have come across Brian Hood and the Six Figure Creative nowadays, but it was originally the Six Figure Home Studio, and I was just like listening. I binged all 124 episodes or whatever they had at that time, and then I decided, I'm like, okay, this is possible. This is for me. I'm going to pursue this. After I got done working on the house, I was obviously still working my day job. I decided I was going to like form an LLC. I was going to actually do this thing. And so I started pursuing music more seriously at that point in time. And so there's kind of those two moments of, releasing that song and realizing like, oh, there's actually something to this. There's actually money to be made. Yeah. And then the second moment was just like binging that entire podcast of like learning everything I could about running a home studio and the possibilities that lie in a home studio. When I was listening to this podcast, I had made the decision for myself. I'm like, what? I think I should, try to pursue this thing. One Sunday, I went out to breakfast with my wife, and so we were at a restaurant called The Griddle, just like good old American breakfast cuisine. All right. And we were sitting there at the bar. I can still remember exactly where we were sitting. And I looked over to her and I was like, you know what? I think I want to pursue this like music stuff more professionally, like as a music producer. And she looked over at me and she's like, yeah, I think you should.
Oh, love that.
That was like the reverse moment from when my dad telling me, never expect to make money. And then my wife actually believing in me enough to say, yeah, I think you should pursue that. Like that was completely like 180 full circle, coming back to that same moment. And so like honestly, I don't think I would ever have been brave enough to pursue music without my wife telling me that. So for all of those people out there who know musicians, just keep in mind like you have a ton of power over a musician or artist or potential producer. Your encouragement or lack of encouragement will mean potentially a completely different path for that person.
That is massive. Oh my goodness. That's huge. And like very similar to me. I don't know how you feel about this. I know it's two sides of the coin, right? You have especially someone like a spouse or a father, someone very, very close. But similar storyline with my wife. Of voicing the desire to do this thing for real, right? Do this music stuff legitimately. And receiving feedback that is an endorsement, right? That's like, yes, go do it. For me, it's like it's a different kind of pressure, right? Because there's the pressure that comes with like a chip off your shoulder if your spouse would say, I don't know about that. Then it's like then you're operating and creating like you have to prove something. But the flip happening where your spouse looks at you and is just wholeheartedly endorsing you and believes in you and is like, yes, go get him. And even my wife telling me like, hey, get the gear that you need. What? I don't know. Like your wife is saying, yeah, no, like buy the stuff, buy the microphone. It's like, it's a different kind of pressure for me that was like, oh, whoa. Okay, so like I should probably actually really do this. I should really give it a go. I don't know. Did you feel that kind of, did you feel that switch of like, okay, there's no strings. It's like, it's an open highway. Like let's do this thing. Did you feel like that?
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. And I think there was a couple moments like that where, I mean, my wife has always been extremely supportive of anything I've done, and like, honestly, a ton of credit goes to her because I've wanted to do a lot of things.
Spoken like a true creative.
Yeah, because I started out, I was like, oh, I just want to be a music producer. I just want to like produce music with people. Then I want to be an artist, and then I want to, I guess first I wanted to be an artist, then I wanted to be a producer, then I wanted to be like this mixing mastering engineer, then I wanted to be a mastering engineer, and then I wanted to teach people about mixing and mastering. So I've just like gone through so many iterations of anything you could possibly do in the music industry, which is why I tell people focus on one thing, because I've lived the opposite and I know how difficult it really is. So take my experience, don't make that same mistake, and just focus on one thing, get good at it, and then you will eventually earn money through that one realm if that's your goal, and then start expanding into the other areas if you want to. But at that point, you don't need to, right? It's kind of like those side quests that you can potentially go on if you decide that this might be a fun little side quest, along your main journey, essentially.
I dig that.
So
that's huge. So your wife fully endorses you, and you get the green light, right? No strings on you. Something that I think we need to talk about, which I believe is the title of this podcast, which is how much effort does it take to produce pro music? So what did it look like? What would you say to that question? Or if someone's like, what am I going to have to do? A common question is, how long is it going to take? How many songs does it take? Right? We covered this in our very first, how many songs does it take to make a banger? Like, how long is this thing going to happen? How many vocals do I have to record? How many whatever? So talk a little bit about your effort, and I'd love to hear your wife's endorsement and just all that stuff. How did that change your effort, or did it change your effort, or just what did that look like, kind of switching into that pro mindset, that pro realm instead of a hobby?
So I think that's huge, is that initial shift between hobbyist and professional cannot be understated how important that is, because it changed for me everything about how I approached music. Instead of just like recording a vocal and be like, it's good enough. I then took the extra effort, that extra 5 to 10% of effort to say, no, we can do better. Let's make it better.
Yeah.
Like that is the level of detail orientedness and also just
nice.
Effort that it takes. And then beyond that, just like your actual skills. So the first thing that I did after deciding I'm going to take this seriously was I invested in education for myself. To this day, I have invested tens of thousands of dollars in my own education around music production, around business, everything. Potentially, like that's why I'm so passionate about education, is because I've seen the life change in myself from investing in that education. Okay. I made good decisions, I made bad decisions in that investment, but at the end of the day, it still brought me to this level of producing professional music way faster than I otherwise would have.
Wow.
And so I wanted, that one thing allowed me to go from quitting my day job, and then ultimately 6 months after that, I was presenting myself to the market as a professional mastering engineer. I was winning projects based on my masters themselves. It wasn't my name. I had zero sway in the industry. I didn't know hardly anybody in the industry. It had nothing to do with that. It was purely that I was actually good enough to present myself as a mastering engineer, win mastering projects. And for anybody who's not familiar with this, in the mastering industry specifically, there's a lot of people will do mastering shootouts. So they will send a single to 4, 5, 6 different mastering engineers, get all of those masters back, listen to all of them, decide which one's the best, and then they pick that person for the entire album. So it's kind of a way to just test the waters, see who's actually good, and then move in that direction.
So it's literally survival of the fittest. I mean, that's brutal.
It is.
That's like, if you didn't get it, the artist didn't believe that you, or whoever who was making the decision, right? They didn't think that you were the one, which is all subjective, right? But still, I mean, hey, if you got it, you got it. And if you didn't, you didn't.
at the end of the day, I think it's a great system because right, gives the artist the best product that they were looking for. So I'm 100% in favor of people actually going out and doing that. If anybody asks me for a sample master, I'll give it to them. Like I'm not going to be stingy about like letting them test the waters before they like invest in a project, because I understand it can be a lot of money to invest in an entire album or whatever. In that time, I had a master, and I knew that this was part of these like mastering shootout type stuff.
Okay,
and it was for the rest of the album. I was given it, I mastered it, sent it back, and the thing is, I actually talked to the band afterwards, and I found out who else was actually mastering the project, and they were all big names. Like, they were established mastering engineers in the industry. They had, $500,000 studios that they were mastering out of, and I was like mastering on like a $4,000 rig. Like, that's all my gear that I had.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I still won the project though, because it had nothing to do with the gear, it had nothing to do with anything else other than I just produced a better master than everybody else.
Wow.
So at the end of the day, I went from working in corporate America to 6 months later winning gigs based on the credibility of my masters. That is what education can get for you, and I can definitively say I never would have gotten there had I not invested in my own education.
Wow.
Very heavily.
That's crazy. That's awesome. I mean, that's huge. And I think that what I'm just hearing in your story is this, and I love it because it's just so approachable. Like, yeah, you just said that you quit your day job and within 6 months you're like crushing it. I mean, that's what everyone would like to do. But that's like the peak, right, of the iceberg. And then there's this massive foundation that's sitting underneath the sea that you can't see unless you like go under. And so I just hear this kind of ebb and flow of music's the common thread, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's the common thread throughout your storyline. So whether it was like high school or, even trying to be a dentist for a hot second or, like whatever it was, an accountant, construction, like even if you're holding down something right in the foreground, in the background, there's still this music thing. And it had these seasons of high interest. It has seasons of low interest, right? And I think that that's just so relatable. I know that's true in my story, where you're not 100%, every day, every season with music, because things happen. But your commitment and resilience to it, of just choosing not to let it go, choosing to still make it somewhat of a priority, right? And I don't know, I just think that's the reason you were able to say to your wife, right? Like, hey, I think I want to do this thing. And it's a resounding yes. Why? Because I've seen you consistently go back to this music thing, and I've seen your diligence there, right? So this might be a hot take for a second, but if your spouse or your family or someone isn't really on board with you doing music, it could be a you thing. Are you actually acting like an artist? Are you actually acting like the mixing engineer you want to be? Are you consistently doing it? I know that my parents could tell you stories of just music all throughout the house, hearing me sing and yell and do all kinds of stuff, right? Like, and I'm sure the same thing with Tyson. Like, you could be consistently found doing this thing you're passionate about. So I don't know what you think about that, Tyson, but that just kind of popped in my head of people being like, no, my wife doesn't support me, or what, my family thinks this is stupid. I'm like, are you even acting like you're doing anything? You know what I mean? Are you even making music? Can they even have they caught you making music? If they've caught you playing video games and doing Netflix more than they've caught you working on a track or something, that's whack. That's you. That has nothing to do with your family. You've given them no reason to believe you're serious.
No, I 100% agree with that. And I also want to kind of point out and answer the question directly, how much effort does it take to produce pro music? And the answer is, it's always more than you expect.
Oof.
Because you have to have that, like, we talked about it in your episode, or the last episode. You were consistently producing music in high school, like all throughout your high school years, and just for fun. Like, it was just because you were passionate about it. Like, that was your Rocky Balboa moment, though. Like,
the montage, right? Yeah,
yeah. Like my Rocky Balboa moment was investing in all this education that I really couldn't afford at the time, and just like taking it seriously though, and doing everything I possibly could think of. Like, granted, I made a ton of mistakes. I don't want to like sit here and say that I made it,
Sure.
because like I'm still on that journey. I'm still working towards where I would like to be in music. But at the same point in time, I've come this far because of those, Rocky Balboa moments in my own experience of, for a while, I would, I was still working my corporate job, so I had to be at my job like by 8 a.m. and I would get up at 5 a.m., go to my computer, mix for an hour and a half or 2 hours, go get ready, and then come back and then be at my job for the next 8 hours. And then I remember this very specific moment was trying to get my mixing skills up to a level that I would deemed as professional, so then I could actually offer those skills to other people. And I just downloaded all the multi-tracks I could possibly find from the internet. And it was during Christmas break. It was at my parents-in-law's house. And something
Grammar,
wrong there.
whatever.
Anyway, had set up my computer. I had brought my iMac to their house, and I like set it up on her childhood desk. And like we were sleeping in that room, and so I would get up though at 5 a.m. I would like go take a quick shower. I'd like come back and I'd sit down at that computer and I would mix until I needed to start work. It was just like this weird moment of like, I remember thinking to myself, like I was producing this one track that I was like, oh, like this is awesome. Like this, this actually sounds like a professional mix to me. Okay. And I don't think I was quite there yet, but I was getting close. But it was by far the best thing I had produced to that point in my journey.
Okay.
And I remember thinking, like staring at this screen, like listening to my mix, and I was like, I'm going to remember this moment for the rest of my life. I was like, this is that. Because my wife is like on the bed, snoring basically, and I'm like and mixing this song. Like, yeah. That's and amazing. I was like, I know that this is going to be a moment that is going to stick with me. Yes. And so even though, granted, I didn't always want to get up at 5 a.m. and actually mix my songs, but at the same point in time, it's like I am so glad that I did that. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, there's two kinds of happiness that you can experience as a human. And so I like to come back to this because there's one type of happiness that is just pure dopamine, right? It's watching a Netflix show, it's eating a cheeseburger, anything that just like makes you happy in the moment. One type of happiness. The other type of happiness is more of a deep set just satisfaction, and that is, I went through something really hard and I came out the other side and I accomplished something. Yeah. That is the type of happiness that I strive to insert into my life because it's more lasting and ultimately it's more fulfilling at the end of the day than just these, small dopamine rushes of scrolling on Instagram 100%. Or TikTok. In the next decade from now, I'm going to be glad for all of the really hard effort that I put in right now to then get to wherever I want to go. So that is what I always strive for, and I think about even in those more tough moments of I just don't feel like mastering songs today. Yeah. But I'm going to think about where do I want to be in 10 years, and is this effort moving me towards that goal? If so, then I'm just going to push through. I'm going to do it anyway. So I think that's just a good takeaway for everybody listening. So regardless of what you want to do, if you're going to be a songwriter, write songs every single day. Don't wait for just inspiration to hit you because huge. Ultimately, the skill is built by practicing. Even on those more creative type activities like songwriting or production, you still are going to get better, even if whatever you're producing feels forced. You're still refining those skills, and you're still showing up every single day. And if you don't show up every day, you're not going to actually move the ball forward. You're not going to improve. But if you consistently put in the effort over time, it becomes unreasonable for you to not be great at that thing. At that point in time, when you're great at something, then you get paid for it. Or again, if that's not your goal, at least you'll be great at it and you'll produce amazing songs and products.
100%. That's just real. Y'all, I really hope you're listening. That last few minutes there is like gold. Would you say, Tyson, would you say that's the advice you would give to your 18-year-old self, to your 16-year-old self, to that version of you that was there just making your first money from music, and your father came over and said, hey, I hope you don't think you're doing this for real? What would you tell that Tyson?
It's actually kind of hard because I feel like if I hadn't gone through the journey I did, I wouldn't be where I'm at today.
Fair, yeah.
So there's part of me that I would say just go make those mistakes so you can learn and be where you're at now. If I was going to give that person advice and I knew they were going to listen to me, huge, which I probably wouldn't have, but let's assume that younger Tyson would have listened to older, more experienced, mature Tyson. I would tell younger Tyson to invest in his education, actually focus on the skills that I actually want to learn, not what other people want me to learn. Because a lot of my journey was stuck in what do other people want from me and for me to do, rather than what direction do I actually want to go with my life, and what skills do I need to go in that direction.
Oh my goodness, that's awesome. So many gems. So many gems in your story, man. Thank you for just being honest and just being real and not holding anything back. I think that, I know I sure learned a lot, and I think that this would just really help encourage other people, because this podcast is, we're trying to give you all the stuff, right, to make your songs and blah, 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 and do all that. That's cool. But also, I don't know, and I believe Tyson shares the same goal of, like, this could be a little corner of the internet where at least you got some people that understand this whole music thing that you're doing. So if you don't have a supportive wife, like Tyson or I, or if you have, a difficult family, or if you really don't have anyone that you feel like you can just be real with this whole music stuff, hang around, because that's really what we hope to be, is kind of big brothers to you, little brothers to you, however you see us, I guess. But you're in good company. We're glad you're here. And I think, Tyson, can we give these awesome people something? You got a goodie for them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have something that I put together. It is a training. It is a free training that you can access, and it covers just the fundamental skills of what creates an amazing mixing and mastering engineer. It is not so much tactical, but it will give you the true foundation to actually be great at mixing and mastering. So if you want to access that, it is the promixformula.com. You can either do the promixformula.com or promixformula.com, and you can access that for free. Again, that is just going to cover the fundamental skills that you absolutely need to master to produce professional music. It may not be what you expect, but it is the truth, and it's everything that I've learned through my own journey of just struggling to mix well and master well, put it into a very short, I think it's an hour and a half or so of training that's going to be incredibly valuable for you. So make sure that you go pick that up. That is the promixformula.com.
Huge. And speaking of education, right? Like, y'all, don't sleep on this. It's free. Like, Tyson already did the 5 figures in education for it. You're good. Just go get the guide and, like, change your songs, change the way you show up for your songs. Go change your life.
Yeah, I wish that was an exaggeration, but it's not. So yeah, make sure you actually do go pick that up. So make sure that you actually watch it once you do get it, because one thing I've learned is that if you get education and you don't actually watch it, it doesn't actually do you any good. I've made that mistake. Don't be like Tyson. Don't make that same mistake that I did. Actually take it, watch it, and then also implement it, because you need to take action on everything that you learn. So make sure that you are getting that. And with that, thanks for watching. And one last thing before we sign off here is, if you like this format and you would want us to cover specific things in music, whether that's mixing or mastering or production or songwriting, writing lyrics, writing melodies, anything under the sun when it comes to music, let us know what you want to learn, and we will then cover that in a future episode. All you have to do is write a review and then leave your comments in the review of what you actually want to learn, and then we will be sure to plan that in a future episode. So thanks again for listening and making your way through my story. For anybody who actually made it this far in the episode, then you are the true fan. We appreciate you.
Absolutely.
So with that, we'll sign off. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Take it easy.